My family always insisted I was overly emotional, right up until the day the sheriff stepped onto their porch holding documents with my name printed across the top. No yelling, no warning, just the quiet, brutal sound of their certainty breaking apart, while they stared at me like I'd rewritten years of family rules in a single afternoon. I didn't argue. I didn't soothe them. I simply stepped aside and let the truth settle exactly where it belonged. Because a week earlier at the Denver airport, I finally understood what my parents actually thought of me. One canceled flight, two text messages. Those were all it took for everything between us to shift forever. Before we start, hit like and tell me where you're listening from. And if you've ever been pushed too far by the people who were supposed to protect you, share your story below. Remind me we're not the only ones. If you'd crossed paths with me a few years back, you might have assumed I grew up in one of those loud, affectionate families who squeeze into diner booths on Sunday mornings. Strangers used to tell me I had a gentle expression, the kind that comes from a childhood filled with warmth. I never corrected them. Pretending was easier than explaining the truth, that my family valued power far more than they ever valued me. Growing up, my mother treated my sister Leah like a rare collectible. Leah got brand new outfits, a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a magazine, framed portraits on every hallway wall. I got speeches about gratitude, secondhand clothes from people we barely knew, and a spot on the floor during holidays because chairs were for guests. My father didn't start the fire, but he never hesitated to warm his hands by it. He'd smirk or pretend he didn't hear the insults that bruised the deepest. That was his version of choosing sides. By the time I left for college, I'd already been thrown out twice. Once for talking back, once because Leah refused to share a bathroom. Winters around Denver cut differently when you're standing in the cold with nothing but a trash bag of clothes at 17. But surviving that taught me something crucial. If I wanted safety, I'd have to build it myself. And I did, quietly. I worked nonstop, took the internships nobody else wanted, studied financial planning at midnight in a library that smelled like stale carpet and burned microwave popcorn. Years later, when I finally moved into my small condo overlooking the lake, it wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. The concierge knew my name. My son, 6 years old and soft-spoken, finally had his own room where no one told him to stay invisible. He's the only person in my life who has never made me feel like I take up too much space. My parents never understood that my distance wasn't rebellion, it was survival. Even after I became a financial consultant, even after I bought the condo and built a future from nothing, they still treated me like the spare child. Leah remained the favorite, the polished daughter with the perfect husband and the carefully curated life everyone rushed to admire. So when I saved for a short trip, a tiny break I earned with my own work, I didn't tell a soul. Not my mother, not my father, not even Leah. I just wanted a few quiet days where no one could reach for me, drain me, or shrink me. But secrets don't last long in my family, and the moment my mother caught wind that I was leaving town, the seams began to pull. The morning of my trip was strangely peaceful, the kind of calm that tricks you into believing the universe might be granting you a rare reprieve. I left early, kissed my son goodbye, told him I'd bring him something small from the airport gift shop. He waved from the doorway, hair tousled, eyes still sleepy. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. Denver International buzzed with its usual mix of rolling luggage, coffee steam, and tired travelers. I blended perfectly. Jeans, long coat, hair pulled back, just another person catching a flight. Nothing about me hinted that within minutes, the entire foundation of my family would crack. At check-in, I handed over my ID and confirmation code, already picturing the relief of shutting off my phone once I boarded. The agent scanned my ticket, paused, then scanned it again. Her expression tightened. Not confusion, but concern. "Let me check something," she said, fingers racing across the keyboard. A knot formed in my chest. "Is something wrong?" She turned her screen slightly. "Your ticket shows as canceled. The refund processed an hour ago." The word canceled dropped into my stomach like a stone. "That's impossible. I didn't cancel anything." "The refund went to a card ending in She hesitated. 4401. My entire body went cold because I knew exactly whose card that was. My mother's. I thanked the agent somehow and stepped away. The airport suddenly too bright, too loud, too sharp. My phone buzzed immediately. A text preview from my mother. Have fun walking home, loser. Loser. No joke, no emoji, just that word, sliced clean and cruel. Another buzz. Being poor suits you. Take the bus. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. People rushed past me like a current, and for a moment I wasn't sure if I was standing or sinking. It wasn't the canceled flight. It wasn't even the insults. It was the clarity that came with them. The realization that my parents didn't just see me as a burden. They enjoyed watching me struggle. They kept me small on purpose. I stepped out into the cold air, not knowing where to go, just knowing I couldn't stay inside another second. I pulled up a rideshare app, but before I could finish typing, a white sedan rolled up. The driver leaned out the window. You okay? You look like someone dropped a piano on your day. I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Close. A text message. He nodded like he'd seen a lifetime of stories behind simple answers. Pop in. I'm off shift, but you look like you need to be anywhere but here. I hesitated only a moment before getting in. The car smelled faintly like pine and worn leather. He introduced himself, Harvey, a lifelong Denver local who drove part-time, and then he just listened. No judgment, no interruptions. I found myself telling him everything. The canceled ticket, the texts, the years of swallowing disrespect that should have been met with fire. When we pulled into a quiet park, he rested his hands on the wheel. People disguise cruelty as love all the time, he said gently. It doesn't make it real. I stared through the windshield at the winter sunlight flickering through bare branches. Then I opened my phone, but not to read their messages. I opened a hidden folder I'd kept for years, labeled Options, Investments, Payments, Trust Deed. Records of every month they were late paying rent on the house they didn't even know I owned. For the first time, I whispered, my anger isn't consuming me, it's sharpening me. When Harvey dropped me off at my building, the cold air felt different, cleaner, almost electrifying. I thanked him, promised I would be all right, and walked inside with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. The lobby was warm and quiet, humming with the soft sound of the radiator. It felt like stepping into a world where I didn't have to shrink anymore. I hung up my coat, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The options folder waited. Page after page filled the screen. Investment notes, property payments, the trust deed naming me the owner of the house my parents had lived in for almost 2 years. Every document was proof that while they were busy dismissing me, I'd been building something solid. They thought I was struggling because I drove an old car and wore simple clothes. They never considered that I lived quietly to keep my life safe from them. But the texts from the airport made something painfully clear. Being quiet wasn't enough anymore. I needed to protect my son. I needed to stop pretending their cruelty was something I could rise above. Memories surfaced like bruises. Leah shoving me out of the house one winter because her boyfriend didn't want extra people around. My mother telling me to quit being dramatic while I stood in the freezing air with a backpack. My father slipping Leah cash on her college move-in day, then turning to me with a lecture about earning things properly. All of it swirled into a single truth. I couldn't let them keep taking pieces of me and calling it family. I opened another file. Recordings from the last time I visited their house to drop off a receipt. I hadn't planned on recording anything. I'd just tucked a small baby monitor inside my bag because I didn't trust leaving it alone. But when I pressed play, their voices filled my kitchen. She thinks she's better than us, my mother said. Cancel it. Teach her a lesson. And that was the moment the last thread snapped. She can take the bus, my father added. She always acts like she's struggling. Maybe she should. Their laughter followed light and casual, the way people talk about inconveniencing a stranger, not their daughter. I sat back in my chair, letting the anger settle. Not hot and wild like before, but cold and precise. I wasn't going to fight them with insults. I wasn't going to match their cruelty. I was going to use the very thing they underestimated most about me: preparation. By the afternoon, I had drafted 3 eviction notices, one for each adult living in the house. I double-checked the lease terms, the payment history, the violation notes, every signature they had ever put down without reading. Everything was airtight. As the sun set behind the lake outside my window, painting the sky in muted rose and gold, I slid the notices into a plain envelope. My hands didn't shake this time. For years, they told me I was too soft, too quiet, too willing to forgive. Maybe they were right. But softness isn't weakness, not when it finally chooses itself. I placed the envelope on my counter, took one steady breath, and whispered to the empty room, "I'm not going back as their daughter. I'm going back as their landlord." 3 days after the airport, I stood at the end of my parents' walkway, staring at the house I used to tiptoe through. The lawn hadn't been mowed. The porch light flickered, and Leah's SUV sat crooked in the driveway, like she'd parked in a hurry, probably because she always assumed someone else would fix things for her. I tightened my coat around me and walked up the steps. I didn't knock. I turned the handle and stepped inside, the familiar scent of lemon cleaner and stale coffee hitting me all at once. My mother was on the couch scrolling through her phone. My father was in the kitchen making a sandwich. Leah was at the island filing her nails, bored and comfortable, in a house that wasn't hers. My mother looked up first. "Why are you here?" No greeting, no concern, just irritation like I'd interrupted a commercial break. My father didn't glance up. "Shouldn't you be sulking somewhere? Heard your little trip fell apart." Leah smirked, tapping her nail file against the counter. "Yeah, thought you'd still be crying at the terminal. Guess the charity plane didn't leave without you." Their laughter, light, careless, echoed through the open space. If they had looked closely, they would have noticed my posture was different. My shoulders weren't curled in. My voice wasn't small. I wasn't a guest in this house anymore. I set my bag down on the hardwood floor, pulled out the plain envelope, and placed it on the counter in front of Leah. "What's that?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "Your notice," I said simply. "All of yours." My mother snorted. "Notice for what? Eviction?" The room went silent. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to pause. I set 3 identical papers in 3 different places. One on the counter, one on the fridge, and one on the bottom stair. My father stepped forward, ripping the one from the refrigerator door. "You don't own this house." "Oh." I reached into the envelope again and pulled out the trust deed. "You signed a lease 2 years ago with Elmrook Trust." My mother folded her arms. "We thought that was some management company." "It is," I said. "Mine." My father's face darkened. "This is ridiculous. You can't evict your own family." I tilted my head. "You already did, remember? Twice before I turned 20. Leah rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. You don't have the money to own a house." "Interesting theory," I said. "Because the payments, the bills, the statements, and your signed lease say otherwise." My mother stepped closer, voice rising. "This is a joke. You think you can scare us with paper? We raised you." "No," I said calmly. "You controlled me. You drained me. And you punished me for having a life you didn't approve of." My father threw the eviction notice onto the counter. "Even if this is real, you don't have grounds." I pressed play on my phone. A recording filled the kitchen. The same conversation I'd listened to alone at my condo. Mom's voice. "Cancel it. Teach her a lesson." Then Dad's voice. "She can take the bus. She always acts like she's struggling. Maybe she should." Their laughter, light and casual. The way people talk about inconveniencing a stranger, not their daughter. Leah stiffened. "You recorded us." "So?" I said. I recorded my property being occupied by tenants who violated their lease and used emotional abuse to control me. My mother's face drained of color. Turn that off. But the recording played on, their words echoing sharply against the tile backsplash. Leah slammed her hand on the counter. You can't kick us out. I have kids. We're a family. Exactly. A family you didn't think twice about putting above my son when you told him to sit on the floor last Christmas because he wasn't a real cousin. Leah opened her mouth, but a new sound cut through the tension. My phone buzzing. A notification. Payment received from Leah Baxter. Leah lunged forward. You said the rent was delayed. It was, unless you'd apologize for laughing when I fell down the stairs holding gifts for your children. Her jaw tightened. You're unbelievable. No, I said softly. I'm consistent. My father tried again. Where do you expect us to go? I gave you 60 days notice, on paper, I said. You ignored it. You're 3 months behind, and you sent me those texts. I met his eyes. If a landlord got those from a tenant, you know what would happen. You're punishing us for one joke, Leah snapped. That wasn't a joke, I said. It was a confession. My mother grabbed the counter for balance. Lucia, be reasonable. Reasonable? I repeated. You canceled my ticket. You called me a loser. You told me to walk home, and you enjoyed it. My father's voice cracked. You're really doing this? I opened the envelope one last time, pulled out the final sheet, and placed it in the center of the island. Their faces went pale when I slid that paper across the counter. It was the formal notice of enforcement, the document that allowed the sheriff to act. This, I said, is already filed. You have 3 days. My mother shook her head, tears forming, not remorse, but panic. We didn't mean to hurt you. Yes, I said quietly, you did. You just never expected consequences. Leah looked around the room, suddenly small in the house she'd treated like her kingdom. What are you trying to prove? That I matter, I said, and that my son deserves better than watching his mother get treated like an unpaid servant. My father threw his hands up. Unbelievable. I picked up my bag. 3 days. The sheriff will handle the rest. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard my mother whisper, What happened to you? I paused. I stopped begging for a seat at a table I paid for. Then I walked away, while they stood frozen in the doorway, their lives finally catching up to the choices they made. 3 days passed faster than any of us expected. On Thursday morning, a sheriff's car rolled up the street, quiet but unmistakable. My parents stood on the porch with half-packed boxes, their faces tight with disbelief, as if the world owed them a pause that never came. Leah wasn't there. She'd left the night before, dragging her suitcases down the driveway while arguing with her husband on the phone about the money she'd used without telling him. The sheriff walked them through the process, calmly, giving them space to gather the last of their things. There was no yelling, no dramatic fight, just the slow unraveling of a family that had spent years pretending their cruelty was normal. My mother tried one last time, reaching for my arm as movers carried out her boxes. Lucia, we're still your parents. I stepped back, and I'm still the daughter you never protected. She looked down, not at me, but at the house behind us, at what she thought she'd keep forever. When everything was cleared out, I left the sheriff a sealed envelope to place inside. A photo of me and my son smiling. On the back, one line. This is the family I choose. When I finally drove back to my condo that evening, the lake outside my window was still and bright, reflecting a peace I hadn't felt in years. My phone buzzed once, an unread text from Leah, but I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The airport, the canceled ticket, the insults, all of it had led me here, to the moment I stopped letting their version of family define my worth. My son ran to the door when I walked in, arms wide, certain of me in a way my parents never were. That was enough. If you've ever had to reclaim your peace from the people who should have protected it, tell me in the comments, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next